Well, hello and welcome back to my studio. My name is Monica, and today I wanted to paint some feathers, and I want to do this in watercolor. So I have my watercolor paper that I'll be using, and this is a paper that's made by Hung, and it is 100% cotton, and it is relatively inexpensive. And I have to wonder if the reason it's inexpensive is they're saving all their money on the glue. This is a block, which means it's glued on all sides. So if you work wet and wet, it'll help prevent buckling. But the glue that they have used for this paper is very much like super glue. I have a really hard time getting this paper off the block without ripping it. So I am using this paper for stuff like this, which I know that I'm going to cut, and I don't have to worry if the edge rips like this. So my idea was to paint some feathers, and you can see I have some feathers here that I have found outside, and which I will put back outside when I'm done with them. The feathers that I wanted to do today, we'll be doing in watercolor, and what I want to do after we paint them is to cut them out so that they can be used as bookmarks. And this paper is stiff enough because it's watercolor paper and it's 140 pounds that there won't be any problem as far as whether it'll stand up to, being used as a bookmark. And I think what I want to do is make each of these about 2 inches. So I am going to quickly just mark this out, and I'll do the same thing down at the bottom. That way, I'm just going to create like a little bounding box so that I can stay within that and get as many out of one sheet as I want. And if you want to, it's up to you how you want to do your feathers. If you decide to do this, if you want to do like fantasy feathers, or I mean, it's really no limit to what you can do. And these are yours, so um, definitely do your thing. I think I'm going to do some that are a little bit more like on the realistic side as far as colors go. Maybe I'll try some that are a little bit more whimsical. And I am not going to cut this. I'm not going to cut these rectangles out. Um, I'll wait until after I'm done painting them. It just makes it easier to paint on a full sheet instead of working with a little scrap of paper. So um, that gives us 5 feathers that we can do. And I don't know how many I'm going to do here today. I'm thinking probably about 3, just to give you an idea, 2 or 3. And then you can, take this and run with it. Um, so the first thing that we need to do is, or that I'd like to do, is actually sketch out um, the feather itself. And the feathers come in all shapes and sizes. Your best bet is to maybe go online and look at some pictures, or if you have feathers, um, that you can use as a reference, that's even better. So I want these to be fairly large, and I always like to start out with the rachis. So that is the center part, what you would call, like in a leaf, is the vein. So just to give myself a guide, and so that I know what direction this feather is going to go in, and and then I'm just going to start sketching out a general shape. And I'm not so worried about any of the details, like You know how part of a feather kind of goes out like that? I'm not going to worry so much about that right now because I can do that while I'm painting. Um, and I love it when I lose my eraser. So I'm just, like I said, I just want to get in a general shape right here. And then at the bottom, there are usually all these little fuzzy bits, and which is like one of my favorite things to paint on a feather. So this rackus in the middle of the feather is typically white or a lighter color than the feather. So I am just giving myself a little bit of a guide here because I'm not going to use any masking fluid or anything like that. I'm just going to paint around this. And um I'll be working wet in wet for all of these feathers. And the reason for that is I don't want these to be super fussy, I guess. I just want to play with my paint and some colors and um, have some fun. So I'm going to get some um, clean water, and I am going to go ahead and wet one side. Now I'm going to wet both sides, um, but I'm going to avoid the this middle part. So I'm just going to lay in some water. Um, just make sure you don't have like any huge puddles, and just get an even coating. And sometimes you have to tip your paper, at least I do, in order to see where I've been and make sure that I've got everything covered. And my studio is relatively dry in the wintertime, which is what it is right now. And so I have to work a little bit quicker. I could plug in my humidifier, but it makes a kind of an awful humming sound in the background, and I don't want to do that while I'm filming. So um, I'm just going to work a little bit quick. And when you fill in your shape, any of the little detailed areas, we're gonna pull out with a smaller brush as we're painting. So you don't have to worry right now about getting these little edges and stuff with the water at all. Um, and I think for this first one, I think I'm going to start with a dark color. Now these are all Daniel Smith paints that I'm using, and this one is called hematite, and I love it because it's granulating, and it um when it dries it has a really nice texture. So I am going into my pan, and I'm not adding a lot of water. I'm just picking up a lot of pigment. Um and then I'm going to start dropping this in, being careful to avoid that the middle. And you'll find that when you're working with watercolor, um, and different colors, you'll notice how some of them spread better than others. Um, and this one doesn't spread um, super well, but that's okay because I can push the paint around where I want it. So I think I'm going to go about halfway, maybe a third of the way. Let's see. Now I'm not looking at a reference for this. In that aspect, I'm kind of just doing what I want to do, but I'm picking more, I guess, natural colors for this first feather. Okay, I think I'm gonna change it up, and this is like it's like a burnt umber color that I'm using, and I'm just gonna start laying that in. I want to drop this in um, right over the dark color that I just laid in. And I think I'm going to keep this relatively simple. And I can see that my water is already, it's really dry at the bottom. So I'm going to lay in a little bit more water right here. So I am not going to leave that completely white because it's just a little bit too stark against the background. I'm going to drop in a little bit more of this hematite. And it's already starting to dry. So I'm going to get this in real quick and then probably just let that dry. And the nice thing is that you can go over this a couple of different times until you get the wash that you're happy with. So I've still got some wet areas down here, which is good. So if you want to start adding in some of these areas where the feather kind of comes out, like that, this is usually when I do it. The paper is still wet down here, so this will kind of soften out a little bit. And I'm just using the tip of this brush, and you can use a smaller brush definitely if you want to. But you can do this all the way up. I would just say um, that it's helpful if the edge is still wet so that it will automatically just blur out right along the edge here. And if not, you can always take a little bit of water and soften it out. Like down here, it's a little bit of a hard edge. So get rid of that. Rinse out my brush again, tap it off just a little bit so that it's damp, and then fuzz out these edges. And something else that you can do is um, once this dries, um, which is probably what I'm going to do at this point, just let it dry. then I can go back in and wet an area and add in more pigment, and we'll do that in a second. But while that's drying, I can go ahead and start sketching in another feather, and we can pick a little bit of a different shape this time. Okay, so I just went ahead and sketched in all of the feathers, gave myself some basic feather shapes, and um, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start, I think, over here, and that way I'm not dragging my hand through paint if I do this one. So I'll start over here, and by the time I'm finished with that, that will be completely dry over there on the right side. So I'm going to do the same thing. I think I want this one to be like a crow feather. And like I said, I'm going to keep mine a little bit more on the realistic side as far as the colors go. So I'm going to do the same kind of process and just wet each side. And I think I'm going to start off, instead of using black, I want the feather to have a little bit of a variation in it. And sometimes when the light hits, um, sometimes you can get like a purple, a bluish kind of purple highlight on a dark feather. So that's what I am going for. So I'm going to lay down a wash of purple first, and maybe some pink in there. So it's going to look kind of wild at first, I think. And this color that I have over here, this is amethyst. Like I said, these are all Daniel Smith. So I'm going to avoid the center again. And I'm going to go ahead and mix in a little bit of this. This is a quinacridone violet, I believe. And I just want there to be a little bit of a variation in color. I might even drop in a little bit of blue. Okay. And I'll do the same thing with the edges that I did over here. I'll wait until I apply the black to pull out some of these little feathery parts. or any sort of, um, you know, any sort of part of the feather that's like sticking out. Okay, I think for this one, I would like to do this kind of like a blue jay feather. And so each side is going to be a little bit different. So I'm going to keep this side over here like a dark um, burnt umber with a little bit of blue mixed in to kind of gray it down. And over here, this side is going to be blue. But I'm trying to decide if I want to maybe keep just a little bit of the top right here white. And if I do that, I think I'm going to, then I'm not going to apply any water up there. So I'll just start down here away from the area. And I still have a little bit of pink in my brush. I think that's okay though. And I think for this, I'm just going to do one side at a time instead of working on both sides kind of simultaneously since they're going to be different colors. So I'm going to get some of this burnt umber and I'm going to mix in a little bit of my Indian Throne blue that I've got over here. I really need to get another tube of this because I am running out. So this gives me just really like a warm, um, a dark. I think I'm going to add a little more blue, get it a little bit more on the gray side, and dull it down a little bit. So I have a blue jay feather on my desk um, that I can look at, and the rachis, the middle part of the feather, is actually dark. So I don't really need to worry too much about leaving this area light. And I'm going to take my brush and kind of pull up a little bit of this color here into this area that's supposed to be white. Something like that. So I'm going to let this dry before I add in the blue because if I don't, we're going to get a big mixture happening here of the blue and the brown. So I'm going to move on to this one, and maybe for this one we can do some stripes. And I'm going to clean out my brush a little better than that. I think I'm gonna wet all of this at the top, including the center section, and then as I come down, maybe I'll skip some of this center area here just for a little bit of variety. So I'm going to drop this in. And we're just going to do like a base color for this feather. And already starting to dry. So I like that there's a little bit of variation in the background color. And we can go ahead and grab some, I believe this is shadow violet. I'm going to grab some of this hematite and I'm just going to mix this together with some of this burnt umber. And I'm going to start in the center and do these vertical lines like this. And I think I'm going to grab a smaller brush too. So the paper is still wet. So these are going to bleed out nicely, but you can just do like a back and forth kind of a motion. And since the paper's wet, these are going to soften out. And then we can go back and add a little bit more detail. And you can see the difference already because this is already drying. So, I'm going to try and soften this out without creating like a bloom. Okay, so I'm going to leave that alone right now and let that dry. And I said I was only going to do 3 feathers, but looks like I'm doing 5. Um, so let's wet this whole feather. And I think I'm just going to do one blue feather. And maybe we'll do like a gradient. So we'll start with a really dark blue on top, and then we'll just let it um, kind of fade out a little bit at the bottom. So I'm going to start with my Indian Throne blue. And I'm going to drop that in. And maybe pick up a little bit of this phthalo blue. I'm going to tip my paper a little bit too, so it will help this travel down the paper. And I think I'm going to drop in a little bit more of that Indian throne blue up at the top, just so that there's some nice contrast here. And I'm just pulling out some of these edges here. And I'm going to do the same thing at the bottom. Just take the tip of my brush, and I'm going to grab a smaller brush actually. And it's just like a flicking motion. Um, you can take some of the paint that you already have laid down and kind of pull that out. I actually did grab a little bit more paint. And- Okay. And this is a good time to, while this is still wet, you can pull some of these lines down, um, and they'll soften out, especially in this lighter area. Okay, so we've got 5 feathers now that are looking pretty good. And this one is dry. So I can go back and I will probably re-wet this. And we'll be able to do the same thing that we just did over here and pull out some of these edges. And maybe we'll add in a few spots on this feather. And if you don't like the way your wash dried, you can always just go over it with water and add in another wash. So I think I'm going to do that with this hematite just up at the top. So the water that I just laid down a second ago, it dried like super quick. So I am just going to work in these little sections, and I'll drop in just some little dots. And I also want to add in um, a little bit of a darker line here against the middle. And I want to do that while this is wet so that the edge, so the edge softens out. So I'm just going to re-wet this up here a little bit, and this, and I'll do the same thing. I'll just add in a little bit of a darker color right along the edge. And I am going to end up painting over the middle part, like I said, um, because the contrast, it's just too high of a contrast. I mean, they're not typically that white in the middle of the feather. So, and if you make a mistake like that, I'm just going in with my brush, re-wetting it, adding a lot of water, and then I'm just going to blot this up very carefully with my paper towel. So I'm going to let this one dry because I'm starting to fuss with this now, but I'm going to let that dry for a second, and I'm going to drop in a darker color here in the middle. So I'm going to do pretty much the same kind of wash that we did at the beginning. But I think this one is dry, so we'll go back and we'll start on this one next. Okay, I took a little bit of a break, and all of these are dry now. So I'm going to go ahead and start over here. And this is the one that I wanted to look like a crow feather. And I am pretty much going to just do the same thing that I did a minute ago with all of the other ones. And I'm going to give this a good coat of water. And I think I'm going to go right over this white that I left. And instead of using the hematite that I used over here, which is, kind of super granulating, I'm going to mix together some colors to make my own black. So I'm going to do some of this Indian Throne blue and some of this quinacridone violet that I've got. And then I'm going to go in here with a little bit of yellow. And I'm going to keep mixing until I get a really dark color. And if you've got like, scrap watercolor paper, and I always have some sitting on my desk usually, you could just give it, you know, a little test. And I think that's pretty good. And I am just going to go ahead and start dropping in some of this darker color. And I'm going to leave some areas with the purple and pink showing through, kind of like a highlight. So I think I'm going to stick mostly over here to the outer edge with my darker color. Okay, so for this one, I'm going to wet the entire right side, and then I'll probably be using some of the phthalo blue on this side. And I'm not going to go all the way to the top because I want to keep a little part of that um, top of the feather white. So it's pretty much just going to be the same process. And working in sections like this makes it really easy because I don't have to worry about the blue bleeding over into this side. So I might grab a mix of this Indian throne along with some phthalo blue. So now I'm dropping in the blue, and I have sped up this part of the video because these are just really the quick final details. I went ahead and dropped in some black for the stripes on top of the blue and just let them soften out. And then I'm going to let that dry. And when I come back to that feather, we'll darken up the left side and add in those black stripes a little bit stronger. Um, Now moving on to the next feather, the only thing I'm going to do is darken up the stripes. And after I'm done darkening those up, we'll let that dry. So I'm adding the little fuzzy bits into this feather, and I'm going to go over that middle section and kind of push it back a little bit so it's not quite so white. Moving on to the blue feather, really the only thing I'm doing is adding a little bit of dark blue into the center and a couple of little detail lines and darkening up some of those fuzzy bits. And for this final feather, I'm going in and I'm doing exactly the same type of wash that I did the first two times. I just wanted this to be a little bit darker. And while it's wet, I am dropping in some dark dots and finishing off the bottom. Okay, so now that we have finished the blue jay feather and we added the dark stripes on top of the blue, I'm going to mix up a little bit of a watery mix of quinacridone gold. And the reason I'm doing this is I just want to warm up this feather a little bit. It looks a little anemic to me, so I'm just doing a really watery glaze of this gold. So right now I'm just going in and I'm just popping in a little bit of a darker line along the center area just so that it helps it stand out a little bit. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to hit this with the dryer, make sure everything is nice and dry, and then I'll start cutting these out. So here are the feathers all finished, all cut out. I left a little bit of a border around each one of them just to give them that kind of sticker feel. And testing them out in my new book, The Service Berry. This is a book written by Robin Wall Kimmerer. I haven't started it yet. She also wrote Braiding Sweetgrass, which is excellent. So I love how these turned out, and they make really great gifts for anybody in your family, anybody that reads. I did also do a second batch just because I couldn't help myself, and I did this one all in metallics, which I wasn't too thrilled with. I like using the metallics more of an accent, like this one. I used gold for this, and then in this bigger brown feather, I also did some small gold dots. But when you lay them out, I mean, I really love these. And I hope you give them a try. You can do any shape that you want, and you can definitely try out any color palette. I think a rainbow feather would be really cool, or maybe just feathers that are all one color, like the blue one that we did. So if you have any questions, leave them in the comment section or any comments. I release a new video every week, so make sure that you hit the subscribe button and the notification bell below so you get the notification when the new videos drop. Thanks so much for being here, and I will talk to you soon.